enchantment.
It's Monday.
The land of EWTN all across the Lone Star State.
It's GRN Alive.
Bringing you faith, fun, and facts.
Live from the studios of the Guadalupe Radio Network.
Join us on the show. Call
877-757-9424.
877-757-9424.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to GRN Alive Monday edition. God is so very good. Praise be to Jesus Christ. How was your weekend? I pray it was great. Joe McClain here for the team on Mondays. We have another incredible show lined up for you today. If you're just waking up to the news, I'd be surprised if you are just waking up to the news. But of course, we have the tragedy of Kobe Bryant and his daughter and others on this helicopter out in California that crashed into a hillside and led to their tragic deaths. And the world seems to be mourning the passing of Kobe and his daughter and the other victims today. So we'll be talking about that. But also, there are reports that rockets have been fired into the Green Zone in Baghdad, and at least one striking the U.S. Embassy. That is also a story today. And then, of course, there's a whole list of stories that I've been meaning to catch up on and talk about and give some Catholic context. So to help us accomplish that today, we have Bree Dale back on the program. You might remember Bree. She was with us back in December talking about how the exorcists, there was 4 exorcists who called for a national day of fasting, prayer, and penance to really combat what happened as a result to the idol worship in the Vatican Gardens. And she's joining us again today. She's a correspondent to the National Catholic Register, LifeSite News, and many other outlets. And she's going to give us not only an update on that story, because she does have a follow-up, but she's also going to help us take a look at some of these other headline news to give us some greater Catholic context. For instance, the protest in Munich. There was the Benedict XVI, Cardinal Sarah, Archbishop Ganswein story that was talked about so much last week. But also, Archbishop Chaput retires and has already a replacement announced. That is probably one of the quickest replacements for a see in the United States that I've seen in, I don't know, the 20 years I've been going on becoming a Catholic. So there's that story. All that plus so much more. Now, Tim Mott, unfortunately, is not with us this morning. So pray for David Magianes, who is sort of filling in for him this morning and wearing about 4 hats. But all that on today's show. Let's pray and then let's dive in. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen.
Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thine intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my mother. To thee do I come, before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen. Amen. And now for the headline news with David Magianes.
This is David Magianes, and these are your GRN headline news for Monday, January 27th. President Donald Trump addressed the annual March for Life on Friday, telling pro-life demonstrators that he is an advocate for the right to life of unborn children and calling for a federal prohibition on late-term abortion. He is the first president to attend in person the March for Life, which began in 1974 and has become one of the largest annual political events in the country. Basketball superstar Kobe Bryant died Sunday in a helicopter crash in Southern California, along with his 13-year-old daughter, Gianna. Bryant, the father of 4, was Catholic, and all 9 people were killed in the January 26 crash. Bryant, who is 41, is widely considered one of the greatest basketball players of all time. He retired in 2016 after a 20-year career with the Los Angeles Lakers, in which the shooting guard won 5 NBA championships, a league MVP award, 2 scoring championships, and other distinctions. China on Monday expanded sweeping efforts to contain a viral disease by postponing the end of this week's Lunar New Year holiday to keep the public at home and avoid spreading infection as the death toll rose to 80. Hong Kong announced it would bar entry to visitors from the mainland province at the center of the outbreak. Travel agencies were ordered to cancel group tours nationwide following the warning the virus' ability to spread was increasing. Increasingly drastic anti-disease efforts began with the January 22nd suspension of plane, train, and bus links to Wuhan, a city of 11 million people in central China, where the virus was first detected last month. The impeachment of trial of Donald Trump resumes today with the president's defense team main presentations in the U.S. Senate. Trump has no plans to appear at his own impeachment trial. Ken Starr, who prosecuted the case against Bill Clinton at his impeachment trial, is now a presidential defender and could begin his presentation as early as today. Cadillac expects to achieve its third consecutive year of record global sales in 2020, according to the head of the General Motors luxury brand. These expectations, according to Cadillac President Steve Carlisle, will be led by continued double-digit sales gains in China this year despite some economic uncertainty and slowing sales in the country, primarily in the mass market. And then moving on to sports, there is one more football game to be played. Super Bowl 54, where the Kansas City Chiefs will play the San Francisco 49ers on Sunday at about 5:20 p.m. So get your popcorn ready for this big game where millions of people will be watching. And Joe, that's the news and the sports for you. Back to you.
Hey, David, did you hear that?
What's that?
Neither did the Astros. St. Angela Merici, pray for us. 15th century incredible example of virtue and holiness and sanctity, but also a very difficult life. She was born in 1474, almost 300 years before I was born in Italy, and she was orphaned as a very young girl. She was 10 years old when her mom and her dad and one of her sisters, I think, died, leaving her and a sister to go and live in a neighboring town with their uncle. And then the uncle died, and the sister dies, and then the uncle dies, and this poor little young girl, Angela, really suffered a lot of loss in her very young life. And she was especially mournful over the loss of her sister. And she prayed and fasted and did penance and begged the Lord for a sign of what was the condition of her sister's soul. And she received a vision of her sister in the company of many saints in heaven, and that gave her great consolation. When she was 20 years old, again, her uncle died, and so she moved back to the town where she lived with her parents, and she felt this call as a very young girl to assist other young women. And you could say in the 15th century, 16th century, that this was a time where many women had very little choices in society, social norms. You either were married or you went off to a convent, something like that. Very few young women lived, without being married and without being in a convent. But she felt called to become a consecrated virgin to God, living in the world, and then assisting with the education of other young girls. And so she taught them about the Christian faith, taught them their faith. And I think in a time when there was so much upheaval and so much confusion about the faith, we're talking 16th century, Martin Luther and the rebellion against the faith in Germany was starting to spread all across Europe. And we're seeing this with others, with other reformers like Calvin and Zwingli and the rest. And here is St. Angela Merici teaching the faith to young women so that they would be fortified in hearing the call of God for their life. And it was an amazing thing. And so she founded the Ursulines. And in 1524, there's an amazing story where she goes on pilgrimage to the Holy Land. When she gets to Crete, she goes blind at the foot of a cross. She continues on her pilgrimage into the Holy Land. She doesn't stop. Even though she's blind, she can't see these holy places. She goes anyway. She returns to the very same spot, to the very same crucifix, and her sight is restored to her again. I think it shows us how faithful one should be, even in the midst of great challenge, great adversity, and even great loss. I mean, think of the people she lost in her life. And we don't allow, St. Angela never allowed those difficulties, those challenges, those roadblocks in her life to stop her from pursuing God's will for her. And also, you don't see a whole lot of pity party going on in St. Angela Merici's life either. Again, I think another lesson for all of us. She founded the Ursuline Sisters, which she was the Mother Superior, I think, for a handful of years, 5 years or something, before she finally passed on herself. And then it wasn't much longer before she was raised to the choirs, right, of all the saints. And so now we have her feast day on our calendar, St. Angela Merici, pray for us. And I think it's a very apropos saint for today, considering how many people are mourning the loss of this incredible basketball player, Kobe Bryant, and his daughter, and the others on board this aircraft. And so with that, I want to say good morning to Tito Edwards from BigPulpit.com.
Good morning, Joe.
Teresa Kamar from HoustonCoalition.com.
Good morning, Joe.
And David Magianis, again, thanks for being on with us. Tim could not be with us. Adrian is missing in action. I'm not sure. I think he told us he wasn't going to be here today, and I just didn't listen to him. Well, that should say a lot, shouldn't it?
He says stuff.
I don't remember him saying that, but okay.
I'm pretty sure now in hindsight he said, I'm not going to be here this week. Sorry. At any rate, let's open it up. There's a lot of stories that I want to dive into, and our guest today is going to be Bree Dale, the contributor to the National Catholic Register and actually other outlets as well. We're going to be on with her in a little while to talk about a lot of these Catholic stories, but let's start with the elephant in the room, Kobe Bryant. Now, any basketball fans here besides David Magianis? Tito, are you a basketball fan?
I used to be a big basketball fan, so it's kind of disconcerting. Well, it's very sad that he passed away, and those that were the passengers on that helicopter that yesterday morning. But I don't know what else I could add to that story.
You know, it's fascinating. I'm not a big basketball fan. And I certainly never really followed Kobe's life. You know, of course, there was the big story that came out about him being accused of rape in Colorado.
I remember that.
And when I read the story this morning from the National Catholic Register, and we'll link to these stories. Without Tim being here to do it, I'm going to have to be very good about doing it myself. So good luck.
That's okay.
But the National Catholic Register has a story out this morning called Kobe Bryant Dead at 41, how scandal turned him to Catholic faith and divine mercy. And here's the interesting thing. So he was accused of sexually assaulting a woman in Colorado, an accusation which he denied. However, he later settled the case with the woman and had a public statement of apology, admitting that they did not look at that same event the same way. And is that cryptic for he's guilty? I don't know. But I will say this, and this article makes this clear, that it was in that moment, it was in that trial in his life that almost wrecked his marriage, wrecked his life, wrecked his career, that he turned back to God and back to his Catholic faith from his childhood. And he talks about how he went to a priest, and the priest helped him to come back into the faith and to take his faith very, very seriously. And so yesterday, among all the reports and news of the helicopter crash, they crashed into a mountain due to fog and weather issues. It was somebody who came out. I don't know the full sources, but there was like tweets all over the place saying that there are reports that he went to Mass that morning. And that does give comfort, doesn't it?
It does. It really does. Because the thing is that shows that devotion and that connection to Christ. And really at the end of the day and at the end of our life, that's what's important, is that union with Christ. That's who he's going to see in that immediate judgment, and then in the final judgment we'll all see him. So as far as but what's beautiful also is a story that came out about a woman who actually saw him at another weekday Mass. So it wouldn't have been out of character, where she saw him and he was in the same pew with her, and she's like, okay, I need to focus, which I was thinking, how often is that where it's like, okay, there's this famous person next to me, and I know I need to focus on Christ. Once again, props to this lady who's like, okay, well, I'm going to focus on the Mass. And then he allowed her to go out to communion first, which is a sign of respect for men to show to women whenever they go to communion. So he allowed her to go first. And she said that there were other ladies that saw him follow her up and go to communion after her. And so just that practice of going to Mass and to a weekday Mass says a lot about his faith. And I think that shouldn't be underemphasized during a time of mourning for him, because there is great sacramental value to receiving Holy Communion so close to your death, and there's great spiritual value to spreading that whenever he has this platform to be able to spread information of hope, including his foundation for helping families and homeless families and encouraging sports to help bring people out of poverty. So,
absolutely, and we can't know the state of his soul or the state of the souls of those on board that helicopter. And I was trying to, and as you were talking, I was trying to find, there was a picture posted on Twitter from somebody I follow that actually had all of the photos of the individuals who lost their lives on that helicopter alongside Kobe and his daughter Gianna. And there was a mom, dad, and a daughter that is among them. There was it was another two ladies with the same last name, and I don't really recall if they were mother, daughter, or sisters. They also lost, and there was another lady, and the pilot, of course, also lost their lives. And it's a tragic situation, and I think it reminds us to always be ready to step into the eternity. And I think it should remind us of our priorities. This is part of the third right, the Knights of Columbus. Getting to the third level, and remember your death, right? Memento mori. Mori. And there's great value in remembering your death. And are you living prepared for eternity? Is the question, or are you living for now? Is this world enough for you? Or are you prepared to walk into your eternal destination, which is the only point to your life anyway? And so it gives us comfort that Kobe went to Mass, and we can certainly pray for the repose of his soul. And we ought to pray for the repose of the soul. But I also have to bring this out. One of the things that always bugs me when famous people die is that how much we focus on the famous person. And again, I prayed for Kobe's soul and his daughter's soul and the souls of those on board that aircraft. But do we remember the name of the Christian who was shot by an 8-year-old in Nigeria a couple of days ago?
Correct. Prior to that, when you asked me, was there anything else I wanted to add? My intention was not to be flippant. I was just thinking.
No, I know. Yeah, sure.
I was just thinking that there are so many other things just as important that's going on that never receives the light of day as far as news coverage. And prior to going on the air, we talked about this just a little bit, and that is one of them. That 8-year-old, that Christian that was shot dead.
Yeah.
And that bridal party, an entire bridal party was beheaded.
Right.
On the way to her wedding.
On the way to her wedding.
And we don't even know their names.
No, we don't. I tried digging up. I can't find anything. I saw it on the news blurb. I posted it, and no one else reported on it.
Yeah, there's another story today. Crux has put it out there. Boko Haram beheads Christian as violence continues in Nigeria. But again, I'm not trying to detract from Kobe. Again, I mourn his loss. I mourn for his soul. I mourn for his wife and his surviving daughters, or the other families that have lost loved ones on board that helicopter, or people listening to us right now who have loved ones who may not make it through today, or they lost someone yesterday.
Correct.
Yep. I mourn for all of those people. I guess I'm trying to wrap my head around where should we be in all of this. Kobe was an incredible individual, attractive, athletic, successful, and I'm glad he came back to his faith. But part of me is just bugged by the hyper-focusing on one individual.
Well, I think part of it has to do with the fact that, we have just with the March for Life just having happened, we celebrate the beauty and the dignity of every human life. And that is important. And but I think there's also something to be said for the fact that we can celebrate talent, the fact that we can celebrate certain specific individuals, and the fact that he had so much talent. He inspired so many people to go beyond themselves, to dream and to work harder because of that. And I think that inspiration helps us to be able to say, okay, well, what helped him to make it to this point? And one of the things that helps to build that kind of character is the faith. Now, is the faith going to mean that you're going to rise up in fame? No, that's not how it works. But as far as it gives him a platform and to be able to speak out for various issues. And for some people, they'll say, well, just stick to sports. That's what you're good at. Focus on that, and that's it. Like, that's what you're an expert in.
Yeah.
But I think also, like, because he becomes a motivational figure, then he has the ability to speak not as a professional in that area, but just to be able to give insight. And I think as someone who had gone to weekday masses and had gone back to his faith, I think that's in a sense, a highlighted point for the rest of the world to see, because we should all be doing it.
Yeah.
It should be normal. Like every party should be pro-life. That should be normal. But does it happen? So we have to highlight those brilliant moments and those brilliant people.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I've listened to the sports radio this morning and to various other outlets online yesterday. They all celebrated his material success.
Right.
And I'm glad we're talking about the state of his soul, that he did attend Mass that morning. I heard the same things on Twitter and on Instagram, and that he was a daily Mass attendee. And so we should pray for him and the victims in there, and pray that they're in the right graces and they were being judged by Jesus, and hopefully they'll be enjoying the beatific vision of God.
Well, and I think we should clarify for the audience, we don't know that he was a daily communicant on a regular basis, but just like the fact that he would go during the week is very telling, because
very impressive.
Yeah, that's very important.
So we're talking about the story, obviously, with Kobe Bryant and his passing, and we're talking about that and some of the related issues. And one of the points I want to bring out before we move on from this, and again, Bree Dale is going to be our guest later, and she may comment on this as well. The fact that during the crisis in his life, in that situation with the lady in Colorado, his marriage was really close to being dissolved, right? To just being destroyed by all of this.
Which is totally understandable.
And yet that it was his Catholic faith and the priest that got involved to help to save his marriage. And I think that's also a beautiful lesson learned from the life of this man, who can hopefully prayerfully put many seeds in the hearts of countless thousands all over the world about the value of your marriage and the necessity to fight for it. Kobe didn't give up when his wife filed for the divorce. He didn't quit. He kept after it, and healing was able to occur, and she retracted her petition for divorce. I mean, let that sink in. In Los Angeles, of all places, where I'm sure it's like, well, it's Tuesday and it's wet outside. Let's get a divorce. I'm being flippant here to make my point. My point is this. There is so much pressure from friends and family at the first sign of trouble to just run to the divorce. And, because you need to be happy.
I'm sure his friends were egging him on to just take the divorce. He's a young man. There's all these available women. Yeah.
Well, think about his wife. Think about the advice his wife must have received about, you don't deserve this. And no, you don't deserve this. That's true. You don't. Absolutely not. And yet there's still value in fighting and struggling to save this marriage. And they did that. And to me, I think is one of the most important lessons from the life of Kobe Bryant.
A little side note, he also married young. He wasn't one of those, from a secular point of view, that was very impressive. When I was a heathen Catholic, I even admired that he fought tooth and nail for his marriage, that he even married in his early 20s to his high school, I believe it was his high school sweetheart, I'm not really certain, and they've stayed together ever since.
Yeah.
That is very impressive.
As a side note, so they were on a helicopter. They were going to, I think, his gym, and I think there was 2 or 3 sets of couples and kids that they were all going together to go to a basketball camp or something to that effect. And so, this past weekend I had 2 tournaments, and I was taking my daughter everywhere and, coaching her, and she was by my side, and we were traveling around town and stuff. And so that kind of, touches me a lot, because he was taking his daughter for something that he loves so much that he's sharing with not only his daughter, but her friends and parents and stuff of that nature. And they were going somewhere to a basketball camp. I did that this weekend, and I'm going to be doing that again this week. And, just that father-daughter relationship, you can see how it was so much love there and stuff. And I was doing that too, and it makes me really sad that happened.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that's beautiful, though, that he was involved in the life of his children.
Right.
The father involved in the life of his children.
Right.
There's so many times, not only are they married, they have mistresses and children from other ladies, and they don't care. They don't do anything to be involved in the lives of their children. And here he is, taking the time to spend on his days off. And he's a basketball player where they have 82 games a year. They're half a year almost.
Well, he's retired now.
Yeah, that's true.
I think he put in 20 years with the
Yeah.
Lakers. Third time, and this is one of the crazy things about the story. It kind of reminds me of like the La Bamba guy. You remember dying tragically in that airplane with like several other famous
yes.
people? There's an element to that.
Sad movie.
Sad movie, right? So the night before he crashed, he went to see LeBron James pass him as third all-time scorer in the NBA. And he was happy to watch LeBron do that. Like, he was cheering LeBron on, and they embraced after LeBron managed the feat, a third all-time scorer in the NBA, and they embraced courtside, and then LeBron wakes up to the news that Kobe's gone.
Right.
That's pretty crazy, pretty sad part of the story as well.
Well, and I wonder how that will affect him too, because there's every life touches other lives, and so if you think about how we're all connected.
Speaking of which, we're going to run out of time,
Okay,
so
go for
I've
it.
got to switch stories now. But again, stay tuned. Bree Dale will be on in a little while, and if she may want to talk about this as well. But before we go to the break and before we go to Bree, I want to switch to the pro-life march from Friday.
Yes.
I know Dave and his team did a great job with the pro-life coverage of the march on Friday's edition of GRN Alive, but it was a first-timer in the history of 45 years of marching in D.C.
Yes.
for life. A president showed up and gave an address. Now, to be clear, this was an invitation to all presidents over the past 45 years. President Obama could have gone, President Bush could have gone, President Reagan could have gone,
Yep.
but none of them went. It was President Trump.
And it was fascinating to listen to him give these phenomenal, soundbite quotes. But at the same time, it was really the emphasis that he focused on how every child is precious and a sacred gift from God. And he's repeated over and over again that every person is made in the image of God. And so he, to quote him, he said, "We're here for a very simple reason, to defend the right of every child, born and unborn, to fulfill their God-given potential." And I have to say that the crowd, the tens of thousands out in front of him and the tens of thousands that were watching him from outside, I'm sure on more TV screens, I'm sure there were more out there, they were it was electrifying. And the thing is, it's not just a Republican issue. There was a Democrat who was out there as well. Katrina Jackson from Louisiana addressed the crowds, and it's her Louisiana bill that's going before the Supreme Court, and so she's fighting it all the way through the Supreme Court, and there is a potential to overturn Roe v. Wade. So this really should be a bipartisan, all the way up issue. And actually, to emphasize this, Congress Representative Scalise addressed how he has been pushing forward the Born Alive Survivors Protection Act in the House of Representatives. And of course, Nancy Pelosi, who claims to be a practicing Catholic, keeps not allowing it to come up to a vote. It's been over 80 times introduced. And so what Representative Scalise is doing now is he is putting forward a discharge petition, which requires 218 signatures to override Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. And so he is less than 15 short. So they have 204 signatures already, and they need some more assistance from people. He himself has emphasized the importance of getting more people involved, but there are certain parties that could come in and show that they can be pro-life too. I mean, we are in a voting season, so
that's right.
So there you are. Also, I think it's very important to emphasize that the First Lady of Louisiana was there. And
a Democrat,
another Democrat,
pro-life,
and also there were so many speakers. There was just I really encourage all of you to continue, even though it's over. Go look back at the National Pro-Life Summit. Go look back at the March for Life. Get your groups involved for next year to come on out, because right now it's still in the news. You can still see how people
Go look at the
become
time
informed.
lapse
The
crowd.
The time lapse of the crowd.
Huge.
What was the crowd number? I'm just curious.
You know, they're saying tens of thousands, but every year they'll end up saying that it ends up being over 100,000.
They used to certify the crowd, but then they stopped because certain people weren't getting the crowds that they wanted, and they thought it looked bad on certain sitting presidents, and so they didn't want to be showed up, so they stopped the certification of the crowd size.
I heard 500,000.
You heard 500,000.
I tell you what,
that from.
if you look at that time lapse,
it's amazing.
It's huge.
There are a lot of people in that one. I mean, it was a 1 minute time lapse, but it was packed. And I can tell you, I actually went to Austin, and there were thousands of people in Austin, and there were more people in San Francisco. There were lots of people in Chicago, but there were, I want to say, and I'm doing this from memory, but I want to say there were 37 different marches around the nation. And so I highly recommend get involved. And also continue to pray for David Daleiden. January 30th, he's going to be going before the criminal trial court.
Wow.
At same day, of course, as the German Synod, which
Oh,
we're get
fun.
to.
It's just
So
double. It's a double
please
hitter that
pray.
day. All right. All right. We're going to go to a break, and we're going to come back with Bree Dale, a contributor to the National Catholic Register, LifeSite News, and many other outlets, actually. And we're going to cover a variety of stories to get caught up on. The Archbishop Chaput replacement. What does that mean? The protest in Munich over the German Synod. What does that mean? And so much more. Did you know the USCCB is being sued for its lack of handling of funds from Peter's Pence? Yeah, all that and more coming up right here on GRN Alive. We'll be right back.
You're listening to GRN Alive. Now is a great time to call. 877-757-9424.
Hey, dear listener, you could win a brand new Cadillac, a 2020 Cadillac CT5 Luxury Edition to be exact. It's GRN's 20th anniversary car raffle. Upgrade your style and commute in comfort, all the while supporting the mission of Guadalupe Radio Network. The drawing for the Cadillac is on March 6th, so get your tickets soon. Each entry is only $25, and you get a fifth ticket free when you spend $100. Just go to grnonline.com to purchase your tickets. That's grnonline.com.
Mrs. Never Remember, I want to thank you for coming in for this lie detector test. It's a very simple test, and we're going to ask you a series of questions to establish a baseline. When you answer the question truthfully, you'll hear. When you answer the question with a lie, you'll hear. Do you have any questions?
No.
Okay. The first question I have for you, Susie, if you could tell us your full name.
Susie Never Remember.
Very good. Now, the next question is, Susie, do you listen to Catholic radio?
Yes.
Susie, do you love Catholic radio?
Yes.
Susie, do you pledge to Catholic radio?
Yes.
This next one should be easy. Susie, do you fulfill your pledge to Catholic radio?
Yes. Oh. Well, sometimes. Well, I will.
The chickens used during this demonstration were not real, but our need for you to fulfill your pledge is. Thanks from your friends at the Guadalupe Radio Network.
I'd known about the station for a long time, but I have to confess I never tuned in. Perhaps I was biased. But then that changed, actually. Once I started listening, I kept the dial where it was at. I like Teresa Tomeo and Al Kress, and I just like their personalities. Call to Communion with Dr. Dave Anders and More to Life with Pop Checks. I really, really love the show. I've learned a lot. But, also, I really like that there's prayers interspersed. I get a lot more praying done in the day that I wouldn't otherwise. We want to support the radio station for sure.
The Guadalupe Radio Network, Catholic Radio. Radio for your soul.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to GRN Alive, Monday edition. Hanging out with you across the Guadalupe Radio Network, and we're pretty excited about that. And just as by way of reminder, we're giving away a Cadillac in March, and maybe you, dear listener, could be driving away in a brand new luxury CT5, I think it is, edition. It's a beautiful car, and you could be the winner of it. And here's the thing, and this is truth in advertising. Yes, you may win a very cool car. That's true. What do we get out of it? We get out of it the ability to continue our media apostolate, sharing the good, the true, and the beautiful. and doing it for the glory of God and the salvation of souls across 37 stations and reaching into 10 states over radio, the powerful medium of radio to touch lives. And you get to help us with that. And you might get to win a cool car, too. You can see all the details, the rules, and purchase your tickets right online at grnonline.com. And joining us by phone, returning to the show, is Bree Dale. Good morning, Bree.
Good morning. How are you all?
Praise Jesus, we're alive. And that counts. War that was going on in relation to the idol worship that took place in the Vatican Gardens. And you also posted an update. Let's start with that. What was the update? What did the exorcist say was the outcome of all of that?
Right. So my email redacted, of course, because I can't reveal who these individuals are, but these priests are. But I did provide the email showing that there has been correspondence. That's because I'm someone who's been really pushing for the last few years on being able to provide evidence to journalism, and there's basis. So, joining together and praying. I think a lot of people really want to do something, not just talk about the issues at hand, but really want to be part of something to be able to fight. They also wanted to let you know that there were certain members, and this was something that I put in my longer article that I did. There were certain members of the hierarchy identified by name by the diabolical in many of these cases, and that's why they saw that there needed to be like a prayer. And they said the Pachamama ritual in the Vatican Gardens was something that was diabolically influenced, and so what they said, they called for prayers of reparation. And I should also say that there is a kind of and the spiritual battle on their end. And they believe that the spiritual effects of the Pachamama rituals seem to have been mitigated for the most part, but there still remains effects from other diabolically influenced events that appear to be occurring currently in the Vatican and elsewhere. And these are affecting the church at a spiritual level. And so we have to continue to do the spiritual warfare. So they wanted to say, again, thank you for your penance. Thank you for your charity. May God bless you all always. And that was their message.
We're talking with Bree Dale. She is a contributor to several outlets around the Catholic world and actually beyond. And we're going to talk about a lot of various stories here. And, you know, Bree, there's so much to discuss. I sent you an email this morning with a few sample stories. And then I think I've dug up another dozen after that. And I guess, how about with this? There's a report out this morning that there's rocket fire in the green zone and
with what I say, because this is an event, an ongoing situation. When we hear things that are going on in the news, right, usually comes about 12 to 24 hours after the actual event. Sometimes earlier, and especially with new media nowadays and Twitter, we will see things happening on the ground as they're being live streamed. So I just want to make that kind of an open-ended comment. But when it comes to assessing the situation, it's dynamic right now, obviously. In Iraq for the last, I would say 6 to 7 months, we've been seeing an uptick. This is all open source as well, of Iranian activity. I have a source who's been on the ground in the Nineveh plain, sending pictures back of pictures of the Iranian mullah. So far as seven to 8 months ago when he was on the ground. So they have been actively involved funding certain militias because it's the government there is not solid, and the people in Iraq are tired of the government actually being corrupt, listening to only one side. This is normal in the Middle Eastern world. Unfortunately, so when they've been protesting, and the certain militias have been firing live fire into crowds. Again, open source. You can take a look at this. So there has been ongoing fights, ongoing protests, but of course we have not been hearing it in the West because the news has been dominated on the impeachment and whatnot. So just like anything else, we're not hearing about what's going on in Nigeria or in Lebanon, where there's been near civil war. We haven't been hearing about what's going on in Iraq. That being said, the Iranians, the foreign minister, the mullahs have been putting out a lot of, it's one of those things as someone who's kind of an expert on the information warfare, and especially new media, it's been really interesting to be watching our president's Twitter account going out and actually posting things in Persian in the last few months and last few weeks in particular. Because in Iran, there too have been protests, big protests, and part of that is due to the sanctions that the United States has placed, very harsh sanctions against Iran for sponsoring terror and proxy wars in Syria, proxy wars in Yemen, and now we're seeing it in Iraq. And this is part of, I think, in my assessment and in a few other military assessments, there has been this big move in the Iranians to try to centralize and bring together the factions in Iran against one common enemy, and that's the United States. But it hasn't worked in the communication warfare. And so they tried to centralize that again around the recent death of one of their military leaders, as we know, and that has failed as well. And so we are seeing this information warfare going on. In Iran, they've shut down access to the internet quite a bit, but still protests and videos of protests are leaking to certain journalists out in the West, who are then putting it on new media and getting it out there. But I have a tweet that the president posted at 7:16 p.m. on the 25th of this month, and he put out, Iranian foreign minister says Iran wants to negotiate with the United States but wants sanctions removed. No thanks. And so I think that's something that needs to be understood, that when it comes to dealing with dictators, whether it's North Korea, Iran, and others, what are they seeking? They're wanting money. They want money, and they are feeling the pressures of the sanctions. And so they are seeking to do what they can to rile up the forces against the great Satan, the United States. But it's not working. The people are not seeing it as such. We actually saw videos of people protesting against, in Iran, their government, and walking around.
I saw that.
Painted American flags, right? So they are actually fighting against what the dictators are doing, and they really are feeling the heat. And so this is just another show of force. The Iranians want us to strike Iran, but the way that the president has done it has been to hit at the heart of the dictators, which is dealing with money and power.
We're talking with Bree Dale about a variety of topics today. She is a contributor around the National Catholic Register, the Catholic Herald, LifeSite News, Church Militant, and other outlets as well. And so we're talking about a variety of topics. And if you want more, hang out after the show goes off of the radio on our live video feed on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. And we'll do an after show if Bree can hang out with us. Maybe we'll continue our conversation there for the after show. But until then, I want to switch the topic again and now talk about some more church-related topics. For instance, there's a variety of topics I'd love to get into. Archbishop Chaput's retirement, for instance, the USCCB being sued. There's still some fallout going on from the Cardinal Sarah, Benedict XVI book, and Archbishop Gonswine. There's still some fallout there. Pope Francis seems to still be giving interviews to a 90-plus-year-old atheist who never writes down a note, and continues to tell us that the Pope is teaching heresy, and we don't know who to believe, what to believe. So that's still going on. Of course, there was the protest in Munich, Germany last week over the German Bishops' Synod there, and why that is an issue that we should all be praying about as well. And then, of course, Bishop Strickland met with the Pope this past week, and he actually asked Pope Francis for an update on the McCarrick report, and I found that very interesting. And then I think it was Church Militant over the weekend put out some undercover video of Cardinal Supich making some kind of weird statements about female priests. So all of that is on the table here, Bree, and where would you like to begin?
Where can we begin? You know, it's so funny. I was talking to another colleague about this. It always feels like it's like about a month, within a span of a week, because of the news that keeps coming out of the church. And so, honestly, I think I want to first maybe address the Munich protest, and then we can go further if we can.
Sure.
I think it's really important for people to understand something. I was speaking to a leader in the traditional Latin Mass movement in Germany over the weekend. And she had attended a similar event hosted by Professor De Mattei in October timeframe, right during the Amazon Synod in Rome. And she was really very impressed by it. I think they had like 200 individuals show up. It was very quickly arranged. It was open to public, and it seemed to have had an effect. I mean, in Italy especially, to have people praying on a bridge, praying the rosary in silence. I mean, that definitely has a statement. But she was very apprehensive, and actually she really was not pro the Munich event. And when I pressed her further, she said, well, first off, there was by invite only, and she thought that did not support.
I agree.
A lot of the whole idea of unitive factor in the church.
I totally agree. I felt like that bugged me too, as if they're now this group gets to be the determining factor of protest. They get to be the voice. I mean, did we vote them into this? I mean, I support I support them. I support them, and I'm glad they were there, and I'm glad they did that. But it just seems like, well,
elitist.
Yeah, it did. It did come across that way to me.
Like we're better Catholics than you.
Well, and I think that there is a tendency. I know that Father Ripperger has actually had Father Chad Ripperger has actually spoken about this within the traditional Latin mass movement, that there is that tendency, there's a temptation there. But in his defense, I also understand where DeMattei comes from, where they were actually, they knew that in Munich, the mayor in Munich has a very deep connection to Cardinal Marx, and they believed that the government would have suppressed them even being able to stand up and do this, even though it was a peaceful protest, if the word had gotten out. So I can understand that side as well in his defense. But a big part of the protest afterwards was a press conference where only a few individuals of the press were there, which is problematic in any case because you want as much press, whether it's negative or positive, you want the press to cover an event.
Yeah.
But what was there, one of the points that DeMattei made was that he thought that the Germans needed to stop paying the tax. And there is a tax that Germans get, kind of like what we get out of our IRS. There's a tax that is automatically deducted from the German paycheck as a Catholic, if you align as a Catholic to the Catholic Church. That's why the German church is so wealthy, even though the attendance is very low. It doesn't matter whether you attend church. If you want to be able to baptize your kids or get married in the church or have a funeral in the church, you literally have to identify as a Catholic to the government, and the government takes that tax out. So DeMattei says you have to end that. You've got to stop that. But what the woman who was the leader said to me was, this is where the problem is when you have a group like this that is the large majority not German. And that's something that people have to understand, that people came from outside Germany to protest in Germany against this bishops' conference. Again, the bishops' conference is within the church, and the bishops' conference in Germany is very, very influential in the Vatican, so I can understand that point. But when you come into another country and you're protesting a country's laws, you have to understand the foundation of the laws. She said, if we were to do this, we could be ostracized from our parishes. We could be suppressed. You have no choice. In order for you to stop paying the tax, you have to go and you have to sign a paper that says, I am no longer Catholic.
Yeah.
And
that's pretty tricky business.
That's a whole other problem.
Huge.
Yeah.
It is.
And it's a holdover from Nazi era. So the tax itself has to be revoked. Hitler was the one who
It was Adolf Hitler. I'm sorry, Bree.
And the Germans, yes.
We have 5 minutes left, so let's let Tito give a quick input into this. 5 minutes left with Bree Dale, and then we'll go into the after show.
Yes, Bree. It was Adolf Hitler who personally signed the agreement with the church so they could collect taxes for them, and it's gotten to the point that they will refuse baptism, give you a marriage in the church, other sacraments if you do not pay the tax. But you could have several mistresses and still get married in the church as long as you pay your tax. And that came from Casper. Cardinal Casper said that. I could not believe my eyes as I was reading that. And that is, I believe, is a problem. You're right. There's maybe 2 or 3 people, and I'm being overly positive, of attend Mass on average in Germany on Sundays, and yet they are the second most powerful contributor to Peter's Pence and many other donations to the Vatican after the United States.
And with that, with only a few minutes left on the program when we're across our radio network, afterwards we'll hang out for a little while. I know, Tito, you're going to have to go, but we'll hang out for the after show for about a half hour on the video feed, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at GRN online. But with just a few minutes left on the radio side of the program, Bree, maybe you can transition there to the USCCB being sued for mistreatment of Peter's Pence money.
Yeah, it's brilliant, actually, I think, in a tactical sense, coming from the layman side, that, laymen are donating to specific causes, right? So when we here in the United States, we're very generous, contribute to certain funds, say Peter's Pence, or we can take a look at, Legatus or other, nonprofit NGO type activity. When we see the American, hardworking American donating their money, they want their money to go towards those particular areas of focus. So Peter's Pence was to be used specifically. A lot of people see that, every year with the fund drive, that this would go to help support the Pope in supporting the poor. And instead, what we ended up finding out through the Vatican Bank debacle, and we're still finding out things, that the Peter's Pence was in part monies were shifted to help support the Elton John biopic that came out, and amongst other things. So it was used not in accordance to what people wanted, and so for many people in the lay community, they're outraged that the money keeps being spent for other things. And so this seems to be a lot. The lawsuit seems to be going to because of course there are also lawsuits that are going out and suing the Pope and suing the Vatican from the United States, but the USCCB is the one that helped fundraise for Peter's Pence. There are still fundraisers going on for Peter's Pence. If you go onto your diocese or your archdiocese websites right now, especially where the bishop is identifying fundraisers, I can say that I have seen documentation in some of these archbishops, and one being in Chicago, I believe, that they are fundraising for Peter's Pence again. So the people are outraged, and so their response is, we're going to go to where the source of this fundraising is coming from, and it's the USCCB here in the United States. So I think it's a really interesting tactical approach from the layman's side. And it will be interesting to watch as the church kind of scrambles to try to explain why monies were misused.
All right, hold that thought. We're talking with Bree Dale. She is a contributor to several outlets around the internet and beyond, the National Catholic Register being among them. And we're talking about a variety of topics today, but we're just about out of time for our GRN Alive program across the Guadalupe Radio Network. And so we're going to sign off here in a second, but we'll hang out for the live video feed on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at GRN Online for the after show where we continue to discuss some of these topics. So until we do that, I want to just say hang out, Bree. Just give us a few minutes. We'll be back on the air with you. Until then, I want to remind you, our audience, that we are giving away a brand new Cadillac in March. You could be the winner of that. It's a win-win deal for you and for us. You might win a Cadillac, and we get to continue our radio apostolate across 37 stations. And who knows? Maybe there'll be a 38th soon. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying it's possible. Who knows what God has in store? But I know this, with His help and your help, amazing things happen in the souls of thousands of people, because we're sharing the good, the true, and the beautiful through the power of Catholic radio, and you're helping to make that possible. You can purchase your car raffle tickets online at grnonline.com. They're only $25 a piece. You can get 5 for $100. That means you get an extra ticket. And in March, we're going to draw out the winner and give them a brand new Cadillac. That's always a fun thing to do. Until then, please keep us in your prayers. We are obviously praying for the repose of the soul of Kobe and his daughter and all those souls lost on the helicopter, and for you and for your families too. Until next time, may God richly bless you, and we'll see you in the after show in just a few minutes.
Thank you for listening to GRN Alive.
From the studios of the Guadalupe Radio Network.
For more faith, fun, and facts,
join our email list.
Just text the letters GRN to the number 42828. That's GRN to the number 42828.
And take Jesus wherever you go this week.
All right, welcome to the after show here on the Guadalupe Radio Network and the GRN Alive Monday program. Bree, are you still there?
I am.
All right, praise Jesus. The after show is that time where we let our hair down and just have a more casual conversation about some of these stories that we were discussing during the program itself. And as I always say, some of us have more hair than others. So Teresa,
has very long hair.
I'm going to bring her into this conversation. She didn't get a word in edgewise during the show itself, but I know that you had a couple of comments you wanted to make.
Well, there was one thing I was looking at is that there's a concern that perhaps less than 10% of Peter's Pence is being used for what it's saying it's being designated for.
Not like it's like 85%. Not even. It's like less than 10%.
Less than 10%. And I think one of the things that I'm seeing parishioners starting to do now that are wanting to say, well, I still want to contribute. I still want the schools to be established. I still want to have, I think Catholic education is critical to, growing the faith. I want to make sure that my parish is taken care of because we have an amazing pastor. And so what they'll do is they'll donate specific items. So they'll find out with the budgeting committee what is the church wanting to grow toward? What's the electric bill?
Yeah.
How do we donate for this? How many students did you want to grow? How many scholarships can I give for these students? And then they're donating their tithe directly, so that way that can continue to grow. I think part of the challenge, though, with this, and that we kind of rely on Peter's Pence for still on some level, is that there's so many groups that need the funding that we won't know about, and that's supposed to be being funded by them.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to see a single dime put into some investment firm in Italy and then used for whatever whether it's a horrific movie that is immoral and we should never support, or even if it's just collecting interest in a bank. I mean, that's not what Peter's Pence is about.
But I think the other challenge that I have that I would love for either of you to comment on, and this probably shows my ignorance, but like once they are sued, where is that money going? Because I don't want all Peter's Pence to end up in lawyers' pockets either.
Well, some of it will be.
Well, I understand.
Can't sue without attorneys.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, there is a legal system, there's legal paperwork, and people who are filing need to get paid too. But where's it going?
Right. I think that there are many people who are concerned about the actual establishment of the USCCB as well, because it isn't just Peter's Pence. I know that Michael Hitchborn of the Lepanto Institute has really made it his calling to start identifying, deep diving actually, into some of the other, the Catholic Relief Society, many different organizations that have Catholic in their name, but then you start to see where money is going, and you start to see that they are actually contra to what we believe in. I have a major story that's coming out that is that shows this actually. Hopefully, Register will be publishing it this week, but it deals with some of the very concerning leftist organizations getting involved with funding events and coordinating events with Catholic Vatican entities. And we saw that with what happened with the Amazon Synod, where, Ed Penton was able to break the story on the Ford Foundation funding that in part through another organization called REPAM. So you do actually have to start to connect the dots, because like we saw with Peter's Pence, it wasn't like Peter's Pence funded directly this biopic. What happened is just like what you said, Peter's Pence this money was taken and put into investment where this investment firm then funded it. So the trail is a little bit longer and you have to deep dive into this. But when we see that, or we see monies that have been given from tithing to the Vatican, monies that then have been invested into real estate that has lost, like how do you lose money in London real estate?
Right.
But you start to say, what is going on? So I actually have heard similar things in regards to parishioners, saying we want to fund specific causes. One of my big causes, and I'm going to promote him because I love what he does, is Father Benedict Kiley has an organization called Nazarene.org.
He was our guest last week.
So I love him. So Father Benedict Kiley's Nazarene.org, you literally are funding micro, grants to, or micro loans to people on the ground in the suffering churches in the Middle East. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
So we have to start, if you're going to take your money and invest in something, you're going to do some research in the investment. And I actually think nowadays, because of what we've been seeing with, and frankly, like this is just me, but I don't want my money to be funding lawsuits, in regards to priests who have been covered up for abusing children. We see this happening in New York. We see this happening in Boston. And so there are entities right now in canon law and civil law who are now starting to stand up for the layman to say, hey, you can't sell off that church to pay for lawsuits. That's stealing for the layman. Because of a 501c3 status, that actually doesn't belong to the church. So there are things that you have to start. That church, that parish actually doesn't belong to the USCCB. So we need to start looking and protecting our churches, our families, but we also have to start looking and saying, like, where are our investments going? Are these actually going to what, they claim they are?
Yeah.
We need to do that research, unfortunately.
Part of the challenge that I'm looking at is that we have, and we talked a little bit about this after the after show here in the studio.
The after show.
Yeah. So like the fact that there is a structure that is set up, if it would just be used properly, and we could just get people, virtuous people that want to spread the faith in those positions, then it's like, I hate to let all of that go. I hate to see that get disbanded. But on the other hand, even if we were to say, get rid of it, or we need to pay all this stuff off, okay, well, you know what? When you have corruption in those places, they're going to take that money from people that actually need it, and they're going to keep on funding their condos.
Right.
They're going to keep on funding this twisted version of catechesis, or watered down version of catechesis. And so I guess where I'm trying to figure out is, it's critical right now for the average Catholic that wants to donate and wants to be financially involved to do that research and to actually build directly. But then how do we deal with this? How do we deal with this lawsuit situation? Because they should be held accountable, but there's more to it.
Right. Well, and I would also say, like, we have to argue that here in the United States, we're not Germany.
Right.
So we aren't actually, it's up to us to tithe. And I think one of the things that, America in general is a sleeping giant in many ways. And we have seen, and let's just say on the secular side, we've seen this movement in the United States of people. One of my colleagues at work is actually a quote unquote walk-away Democrat. And, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you are on. And this is one of my things as a journalist that I'm really trying to adhere to is you need to educate yourself. And the only way you're going to educate yourself is to call out journalists, both right and left, who are not providing you with the details of their reports. If they say something like an anonymous source says this, great, show me the evidence. If you have an anonymous source because someone is afraid or because of their position, they can't speak openly, then you need to have something else to support it, because people are wanting to read to be informed, not formed. And the problem is that we're seeing a lot of journalists thinking that because they have this power over communication, it's the same thing with money, right? The media is the weapon of the people. So if you are being misinformed, you are being malformed, and we see that in the political side. So there has been a pushback on that. Our president has been one of the biggest proponents of that. Again, perfect communication strategy to call something out fake news, and it ends up being fake news. You've just now discredited an entire organization for that. And that, to put a journalist on the defensive like that is really hard to come back to. So I bring that up because it's the same thing. We have the responsibility to wake up and not just accept what people are telling us.
That's right.
And unfortunately, the USCCB has not been transparent. They speak a lot about being transparent, but we don't actually see the transparency. And when we see what happened with regards to McCarrick was connected to some of the largest fundraising efforts in the United States. And what was he? He was covering up. It is reported that he would carry envelopes of cash. Mm-hmm. So you can't and give it to specific people.
Same thing with the bishop that got ousted from West Virginia, by the way. He got busted for doing the exact same thing.
Connected to McCarrick.
Yes.
Connected to McCarrick, too. So you start to make these connections and saying, okay, who was formed by what? And unfortunately, power corrupts, and absolute power absolutely corrupts as well. So when we have a monarchy, which is what the church is, Plato speaks about, the benevolent dictator or benevolent king, the philosopher king, right? But you can also have a dictator. Mm-hmm. And a dictator can, and it doesn't have to be, I'm not calling up the Pope a dictator, but I'm saying that even in your diocese.
He is a prince of the church, yeah.
He's a prince of the church, and so are the cardinals, and the bishops are the bishops. If you've lost supernatural faith, God forbid it, but if you've lost supernatural faith, you are still seen as the prince of the church in your diocese. And so you are kind of the king of your diocese. And so in the United States, many people we've been blessed with amazing popes like John Paul II and Benedict. And so people have come to just assume that things are being done correctly. And unfortunately, or fortunately, when the light is shown on these bishops, we start to see a corruption. We need to get the corruption out. And Americans, just by nature, are those who will act. There are many people who will not and sit back and wait, but Americans act, and I think that that's what we are seeing right now with the lawsuit itself.
I want to switch back to another topic we discussed. There's other topics I'd like to bring out that we didn't get to discuss. But I'm gonna rant pet peeve. It's the host of show prerogative here. So one of the things that bugged me about the protest in Munich, and again, I'm glad they had a protest in Munich. I wish I could have been there to stand with them. I mean, I felt like it was just, I praise God, we need to have these sort of heroic, but I like the prayerful element. So I want to say that what I'm about to say, don't take it too far, because I'm glad they did it. Yet at the same time, one of the pet peeves I have, besides the limited nature and invitation only, you're not invited, besides that, the Vigano being there, like, okay, great, he's come out of hiding, I'm excited, he's there, but then nobody points him out, like it's that guy right there in the middle, like we have these cryptic images of like, is that him? I'm like trying to do facial analysis to figure out, is that the guy? He's got a beard, I'm not sure, his nose looks different, like this is juvenile, this is ridiculous, this is silly. That guy is Vigano and he's standing with us, like that's what I wanted.
Well, there is an aspect too. Just here comes my military background. It's about the prudence, because he is in hiding for a reason, and I can't go into detail on that because there are, there's just elements of very bad actors that are involved who are looking to silence individuals like Vigano, and unfortunately we see that in the church. And we can go into that all day, but of course there's a lot of investigation that's still ongoing, so I can't really go into detail on that. But what I can say is Vigano is a powerhouse when it comes to speaking out. And so I like to kind of make the image of the shock and awe, right? You only have one time when you have that shock and awe, that like presence. There's only one time that Vigano comes out of hiding and he presents himself in union with something, right? So just looking at this on a PR standpoint or strategic communications, you can't put that back in the bottle after it's done. So he chose to join with this group during this time. Okay, the statement was done, but it actually, I think it kind of detracted from the actual reason these people were there, because the story was then Vigano comes out of hiding and not actually about the event itself. Or even the press conference. And I think there's danger in two areas. I'm just talking strategically. Now, when it comes to any kind of crisis, it does seem to be that certain individual bishops who have been speaking out are the ones that many journalists turn to for responses or comments. That's great, because journalists, I actually think that, journalists are used to doing that. Hey, let's go to the people who give the quotes. But what does that do to people who are just once in a while reading? It starts to be like, oh, well, here comes the quote again. Or, if everything's a crisis, then nothing's a crisis kind of attitude. Yeah. And you water down the effect. And that's my real concern at this point. Was this, and it's an after action now because it's done, but if he comes out of hiding again, or he comes out and he speaks out, what kind of effect is that going to have now? Because it's kind of out of the bottle. So I'm just looking at this as a strategic communications event. I don't know the details behind it, but I do think that made the news, it more newsworthy, the event itself. I am still very, I feel bad saying it, but I am still very, I'm very concerned because of the effects or the response from the Germans themselves. Number one, the German bishops aren't going to listen because foreign. They have, unfortunately, an agenda. They've made it really clear. Having foreign influence come and stand out and protest in Munich, not even where the German bishops are meeting, doesn't seem to really have an effect on them. I think cutting off money would, but that I think would have to be done by Germans themselves. And this is a big pain point, as we call it in the technical world. The big foundational issue. Are Germans sick and tired of paying a tax? And let's say you're not going to the church. God forbid you're a basic Catholic where it's I want to be buried and I want to baptize my child, right? But you're not going to mass. Let's say you're just tired of paying that tax. What can you do about it? That's
Nothing.
the question that needs to be asked I think that legislation could happen in Germany.
But it would take
has
that,
to be,
and the likelihood of that happening is almost nil.
yeah, I mean, because there is a very solid connection, and I think that has to be expunged too by the German press themselves to start identifying some of these connections, political connections. Are politicians getting kickbacks from the German government for this? If that's the case, and the German people don't think that that's appropriate, then they need to expend. But it has to come from within Germany. It has to come from within Germany, and it has to be a pain point where Germans have had enough of it for something to occur. And I just don't know if that's really within the will of the people at this point.
Yeah, we're talking with Bree Dale about a variety of topics today. That we had the regular show across the Guadalupe Radio Network, and we hit a couple of topics there, and now we're in the after show discussing a few more. And so let me use Vigano to make another transition to another topic, and that is the Benedict XVI Cardinal Sarah Archbishop Gonswine debacle that took place, and there seems to be some continuing fallout from that. But here's the Vigano connection to that. So Vigano put out a statement when that was going down, and he was relating some of his own experiences of Pope Benedict XVI and Gonswine. And he talked about, through his statement, that Benedict made a gesture to Gonswine and referred to him as Gestapo, which is very interesting and very telling on a number of levels. Number one, Benedict XVI, when he was a youth, was pressed into Hitler's youth in the waning days of the war. And so he very much understands what it is to say Gestapo. I mean, we throw Nazi, Hitler terms around all the time, and we can't have the same level of depth and meaning and understanding as a Benedict XVI could. So what does he mean when he points to Gonswine and says Gestapo? So the implication is Gonswine was filtering some information, picking and choosing what the Pope understood, heard, experienced, who got in front of him, all of that, which is not new, by the way. I think it was in The End and the Beginning in... what's his name? The author of The End of the Beginning. All of a sudden, my brain is just frozen on me. What's his name? Anyway, look up The End of the Beginning, and it's the follow-up to his famous work, a biography on JP2. In The End of the Beginning, the same accusation is sort of leveled against the Curia on JP2, picking and choosing who gets in front of him, picking and choosing the information he gets to see. And so it's not new. In other words, it's not new. It's not a new thing. So
and Benedict and John Paul II to support that as well. He came out.
George Weigel. Thank you.
Last books. Oh yeah, George Weigel.
I could not remember his name.
One of his last books, John Paul II in Rise, Let Us Be on His Way, which is interesting because it really deals with the sex abuse crisis during the time of John Paul II. He did say that he was very bad at the administration side.
Yes.
I mean, we can't be perfect in everything, right? And so John Paul II said he really relied on his bishops and his advisors.
Yeah, mistake.
And I think that's where they saw, I think that's where they saw an opportunity. There was a trust factor there. Look, I'm going to tell you the truth. I've been reading the book. I had an advanced copy in English, thanks be to God. I've been reading the book. It's a great standalone book. But like I said on Taylor Marshall's show about a week or so ago, I'm concerned about prelates writing about a problem without actually addressing the problem. You're coming from the military too. You think that would fly?
No.
From the military standpoint, no.
This is hold on. This is a valid point. Let's just make this real quick. Yeah. So in the Marine Corps, this is how you handle a problem child in the Marine Corps. You're fired. You're in charge. And that's it. That's the whole summation of how you deal with these things.
If you said, what would happen if you go up and you say, Pastor, I've got a problem with this thing, and then you just like leave it. Like you're not gonna, you're gonna get fired on that.
Right.
If you have a problem, you come up with solutions, and we need leaders to lead from the front.
Yes.
Now, people have asked, what would be the solution for Cardinal Sorrell? Well, having the unitive factor with Benedict on this, and promoting the priestly celibacy and priesthood in general, it's a brilliant book in and of itself. It's beautifully written. I've really enjoyed it, but it doesn't stop there. And, think about the unitive factor of all of these other priests and bishops who have stood up and said, look, we want celibacy because, ordinariate priests who are, priests who've come from the Anglican side, all have come out and said, I've seen a majority. Now, I can't say all of them, but a majority of the ones that I've spoken to have said they promote celibacy because, and they give a number of factors. One being like this, Taylor Marshall brought this up, having been an Anglican priest himself, having to do midnight mass on Christmas Eve and then coming back and having to wrap all the kids' presents and put things together and everything. It's a real
God forbid you get called to the hospital to be by the bedside of someone dying and have a wedding the next day and a funeral the next day. And yeah, exactly. That happened in my own family. My father took a bad fall over, and he's better now, but he took a bad fall on Good Friday. And it was at 3 a.m. And I just luckily there was an FSSP priest in the area. And I called him, and he got up at 3 a.m. and went over and gave my father last rites. Wow. It is a life of sacrifice, and priests understand that. Yeah. But to do that to a family, it doesn't mean that it's, like the family can't survive, but it's very, very difficult. Very challenging. So just like going back and saying the Gunstein thing, I can't tell you whether or not I trust Vigano, what Vigano says, because a lot of the things that he's been proven right, and I think that's part of the test, right? If someone says something as a statement that he's not been able to provide any documentation, or we're just having to take his word, you have to then have to start to take a look in the past and see if things have been proven. Well, we've seen, as you say, this is an important point for bring up too. We've seen corroborating evidence to support the statements of Vigano. So in the early days, 2018, when he first came out, there was a lot of negative blowback against Vigano. And then as time went on, we saw other sources come out and corroborate his details. But I interviewed Vigano right before he was leaving the nuncio, the position. And it was a great interview. I had an interesting conversation with his assistant, which was kind of cryptic in some ways. But anyway, I always liked Vigano. I enjoyed talking to him. I enjoyed his strong pro-life witness here in the United States in support of traditional marriage. I just always loved that. So I trust what Vigano says. But here's the thing that I guess partly bugs me still today about Archbishop Vigano. And that is like this statement he put out on Gonswine and Benedict XVI. Well, he knew that back in 2018, but we didn't hear anything about it then. So he's just now coming out with it. What else do you know that you should just tell us, get everything out on the... I'm like, this is part of what bugs me about the whole scandal. I'm tired of backroom dealing. I'm tired of cryptic statements. I am just a Neanderthal knuckle-dragger leg guy who doesn't like to deal with things in a Egghead way. Let's just get this over with and move on. And here we are. That's what I mean by the shock and awe effect, right? Because it's just like any kind of tactics. It's like... when you have a trickle effect of things, you end up getting the boiling frog effect, right? If you put a frog in a boiling water, it's going to jump out, right? It's a big scandal. You provide corroborating evidence. You put things on the table. Let's do it. Yeah. And then if one more conservative bishop comes out with a book, golly gee whiz, we'll have a great library and nothing to show for it. And we're seeing that on the political side too. Like, I just have to say, just on an aside, it's just so funny to see Ambassador Bolton come out with this new book, right? Because it's like anybody who works with the Trump administration is going to cash in on some kind of scandal. And I feel like that there is that on the other side too when we take a look at the church. Like, stop writing the books, stop co-writing books. If you're going to do something, then you put it on the table. That's why I actually appreciated the way that Cardinal Zen has done his, has presented things, is that
frankly, back when I broke the story for LifeSite in June, Cardinal Zen, he put on his website, this is what I did. And he made it in Mandarin and then later in Italian. But he put it out saying, I presented dubia to the Pope because of what is going on in China and the Sino-Vatican deal and what is happening to the Chinese people. And no one's actually seen the Sino-Vatican deal, and Cardinal Parolin will not talk to me. So he puts this out there. You could see that in my exclusive with LifeSite in June. And then 6 months later, because he's not heard from the Pope, then he goes to his brother cardinals. He's not writing a book about this. He's actually acting in accordance to what the church has always taught. First, you go to your brother who has sinned against you. You bring witnesses. And if your brother doesn't address it, then you go to the church. He's done this now. And it's the same thing with Cardinal Burke and the Dubia cardinals, Cardinal Branimiller. They presented to the Pope, then they presented to the church. And I think that that's the kind of unitive force that we are seeking, is that leaders lead from the front, and they come up with like, okay, what are plans of actions? Because we as laymen cannot judge the Pope. We as laymen, we can judge action, but we cannot be the ones to say you are a heretic.
Right.
Maybe some theologians can. We've seen theologians say that, and then we've seen theologians contra that. And I think that that's a necessary thing too. Honestly, in the world of dialogue and in the world of intellectualism, civil debate has gone out the door. Yeah. And my argument has been, like, with regards to what's gone on in, like, Germany, for example, why not bring the other side into this? They may say, no, we don't want to be involved with anything, or no, we don't want to be involved with a press conference. But that's a story, because that means then that they are showing their cards that they aren't actually involved with dialogue and accompaniment. Instead, they want to just, rip the side and emote and whatnot. And that is just showing their cards, right? But if we are not willing to place ourselves and our positions out intellectually in this civil debate, we are losing the debate by that. And that's where, and then we're losing the 80% of Catholics who barely know their catechism and don't know what the Eucharist is. And, we're losing that group because we're at a 101 level, or whatever you want to call it, a very basic level of conversation here, when we can't even have civil debate, And so, and I think that's like, that goes to, well before any of this coming out, it goes back to politics and how we have seen on certain members of the left really go towards emoting. And really, I posted this, yesterday on the Alinsky tactics of this. This is Alinsky number 13. Make things personal because you don't actually have the high ground on the facts. And so, and I think it was Socrates says, like, when you do that, then you're a loser because you're already no longer debating. So going back to the Vigano statements, the trickle effect actually doesn't help the dialogue and the debate. The trickle effect actually starts to make people wonder if there is an ulterior motive there. And I think that there is no ulterior motive for Vigano. He may just be remembering things as things happen, but it does actually water down his effect when we have the trickle effect. Yeah. So that's just as, again, strategic communications, me looking at this both from the political side, where I've been dealing with this for years and years, and me coming into the Catholic world and journalism.
Well, I'm just thinking, I really love the way that Cardinal Zen has been handling his role as cardinal, and I'm just trying to think, like, one of the position points that we keep going back to is that Pope John Paul II had he was so weak at the end of his papacy. He was so sick, and there were so many people that were taking over positions of authority and making decisions for him. And so I think what's going to end up happening is that cardinals, as they are practicing the virtue of coming in and saying, look, we have to put our foot down and protect our priests and protect our laity and protect the church and protect the flock that's entrusted to them. And they're going to end up hopefully letting go of people who are in position, who are allowing in the corruption, and are putting into place people, hiring people who they can actually trust to teach the faith, which is one of the reasons, and I know a lot of people at the parish level get really frustrated about this, but that's one of the reasons why we have why so many parishes require that people be practicing Catholics whenever they're hired as teachers, whenever they're hired as catechists, whenever they're brought in as volunteer leaders, and they're like, well, I'm a volunteer. Like, my wife has been volunteering and making blah, blah, blah for all these years, but she's not Catholic. Okay, well, that's part of the problem, is this need to teach not just from the top down, but also from the bottom up. And so I think what's going to end up happening is with all of these cardinals and all these bishops, they're going to have to remove people that they have trusted for years because they're not trustworthy. And that's going to be really painful to go through that process of revamping and actually vetting people who go through and teach.
Yeah, and you're right on that, but I think that there's also something that really needs to be understood here. We are facing, with this sexual abuse crisis, we are facing civil authorities potentially being able to, if people understand what a RICO case could potentially do to the Catholic Church, that means that the government, the U.S. government, the secular government, has the opportunity to freeze our assets, i.e. our churches, seize them, seize the money that's being utilized by the USCCB, and do it in such a way that it would cripple the church in the United States. And my question to our listeners out here is, do you want to have the secular government, potentially anti-Catholic, and individuals seizing and crippling the church, or are we going to clean from within?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
If you think that you need to take responsibility. We weren't the ones who created this mess. Some people were, but if it's our responsibility to save our church, and I'm going to tell you something. I really truly believe what was said by Fulton J. Sheen on this. It's going to be the layman to remind bishops to be bishops and cardinals to be cardinals and priests to be priests.
Yeah.
And St. John Vianney said the same thing. When you can take a look at a holy priest, you find that your parish may be thriving, but not just holy, But if you see a tepid priest or a priest who might be afraid there's good cause for it. I'm seeing many priests being sidelined for standing up for the truth. And we have to take care of our priests on this too. That's our responsibility as laymen.
And we need to encourage them. We need to encourage those priests and those bishops.
We need to encourage them. We need to make sure that they have a place to go, that they know that they're going to be able to pay their bills and not have to be Uber drivers. If they find themselves in a position where they've stood up against corruption and have had backlash, because within the church, we see that there's a network in the church, and we have to identify the network. And we have to be able to, and that's my job as a journalist. And you guys have to hold our feet accountable. Like, laymen who are listening to this right now, hold journalists accountable. Do not accept us going to the same people over and over again. Expect us to go and beat feet and get a story and follow up on stories. Expect it, because we are the ones who are communicating to you what's going on in the church. And then you can act in that way. We are your weapons, but we can also be weaponized against you if we are also being corrupted or we have an agenda. So you have to hold us responsible. I'm the first one to be called out on that.
Well, we have to wrap up here, but don't have to guess too far. I have an agenda, people. Okay, so if you're at all curious, I absolutely have an agenda. That's the salvation of all souls, and every Catholic on planet Earth every soul on planet Earth becoming Catholic. That is my agenda, and I make no bones and make no excuses and make no apologies for that. And so we have to shine the light into the dark spaces and, just get it over with. That's what I say. You can't prolong a root canal. You just get it over with. Just jump in.
Exactly.
And so with that, I want to wrap up and thank Bree. Thank you for being on with us. And it's always a pleasure to have a conversation with you. And there were so many stories to jump on and comment on. There's never enough time, but you always do such a wonderful job. So thank you so much. Besides your Twitter handle at Bree A. Dale, do you want people to go to your website, or where do you send most people?
Right. So you can go to my website, breeadale.com. You can go to my Facebook page as well. I am asking, though, people who are listening today, if you want to get involved, if you have tips, if you have stories, shoot me a direct message on Twitter, shoot me a direct message through my Facebook page. I do get quite a bit. I'm really, really behind right now and thanking people for my birthday recently. So I'm going through all of these messages right now, but please contact me. Don't be afraid. If you want to do something anonymously, or if you're afraid because you're working in a diocese or in a chancery and you have something, but you need to do it in such a way that you are completely protected, you can contact me. Just DM me and say I need a contact information for an anonymous tip. I will send you a completely encrypted email, and then you can send it to me from there. So I am here. I'm listening. I'm trying to do the best I can while working a full-time job. But I'm really my intent is to serve the truth. And right now we're not seeing so much of that coming out of the church, and so we have to go in and find it.
All right. Bree Dale, thank you so much again. We appreciate that. We're so grateful for your time. We'd love to have you back sometime. So till then, may God richly bless you.
You as well. Thank you for having me on. Pleasure.
All right. Teresa Kamara, thanks for hanging out with us again today.
Well, thank you. And Bree was amazing. So this is really great.
She's a winner every time. Tito Edwards.
He stepped out at this point.
Tim Mott?
He disappeared temporarily.
Where's Tim?
Adrian Fonseca?
Adrian, where's Adrian?
Man, what happened today? David, you did a great job.
Man, I tried.
Yes, you did. You were on the ball.
That was a lot of work.
You were all over the place.
But it was fun, though.
Yeah, well done, sir. I know there's a lot of moving parts, and it can become very confusing, and you handled it well.
I can't believe you did this by yourself years ago.
There's a reason why we improved on that. Okay, let's just not forget. Yeah, back in the early days, I look up at the board, 2014. I'm solo, man. I ran the board, ran the conversations, but I usually never did both very well. So I'd always forget to turn people's mics on. They'd be halfway through a sentence. I'd be like, "Oh, no!"
Yeah, I know. I did that today. But look where we're at. Look where we're at today. Right?
That's right. Yeah.
And celebrating our 20-year anniversary.
Amen. Praise Jesus.
Is that today?
Well, no.
No, it's this year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. In fact, I'm working on some very cool projects in relation to 20 years. So as we sign off here, I can give you some insider baseball. New website coming.
Sweet.
Overhaul on podcast management. The way we deal with our podcasts is going to be a
good, because I know audience members have been asking me about that. That's been the number one question.
Yeah, we're going to make a major leap in podcast audience development, and then I'm overhauling our app, which is actually quite good as it is, but we're going to improve it significantly. We're going to incorporate the new the podcast management tool into that. With our new website coming out, all of that is coming out. It's very exciting. Plus, I am producing a special program for our 20-year anniversary, and so I've been working really hard on that. That's coming out. We'll probably roll that out for the first share-a-thon. It's probably where that will be a resource for the first share-a-thon. So all of that. Plus, we were in Tyler, Texas, having important meetings.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear about that one.
Yeah,
so don't.
He's been really secretive about that stuff. He gives it to the audience before he gives it to us at the backstory.
I can neither confirm nor deny that. Anyway, I don't want to give out too much.
All right, leave up a few up your sleeve.
It was good. It was really good. It was exciting. So I got to follow up on that today. But just recovering from the sickness last week was just, man, that was rough.
You didn't wear a mask either.
A man at my vintage. It's not easy anymore. When I was 17.
That's why we all stayed way across each other at the table.
Right?
See how big this table is? Anybody that can see us on?
Good point. I like that.
So, all right. So there you go. God bless everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us. Do us a favor, and if you're on one of the other platforms, Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, help us spread the word about the Guadalupe Radio Network. I can tell you and promise you, excellent things are coming for us in 2020, our 20-year anniversary of a radio network, the largest EWTN affiliate in the country. And it's amazing what we accomplish on so little, right? Volunteer being our core, and so few employees to make all of this happen. And so amazing things are coming. We could use your support. You can do that by subscribing to our YouTube channel, following us on Twitter at GRN Alive, or hanging out. If you're hanging out with us on Facebook, Share this with your friends and your family. Share this and ask folks to download our mobile app, iOS and Android. You can do so by searching your app store for Guadalupe Radio Network. And until the next time, may God richly bless you. Thanks for hanging out with us today, and have a great day. And don't forget your car raffle tickets at grnonline.com. God bless.